The New York Giants offseason is several weeks in now. What are the priorities they need to pursue? Plus, did the Giants make a mistake trading Kadarius Toney? And I have a bonus interview for you from the Super Bowl with cornerback Adoree Jackson. All that coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traynor, your host, and on today's show, we're going to prioritize what the Giants need to do in the coming weeks as they get this offseason underway. It's actually been underway for about 4 weeks now, but we're going to set some priorities, and I'm going to explain why I've set these priorities in this particular order. Then we're going to answer a question that has popped up a couple of spots from listeners. Did the Giants regret the Kadarius Toney trade, or should they regret it, given what Kadarius Toney was able to do in the Super Bowl? Spoiler alert, my answer is going to be no, but I'll explain why coming up. And then finally, we will close out the program with an interview with Adoree Jackson, cornerback of the New York Giants. Now, this interview was done at the Super Bowl. It was done by Peter Bukowski, who is the host of Locked On NFL. So he was able to get Adoree Jackson on Radio Row, and we'll just pop that interview in there. There was some interesting stuff in that interview, so I will play that for you at the end of the program. So again, thank you so much for joining the Locked On Giants podcast, making us your first listen of the day, or if you're watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Let's get into it, starting with the Giants' priorities for the offseason. Now, I rank these in order of, I've identified actually 4, and I rank these in order from first to last. And some of these might surprise you, some of them might not, but here goes. The number one priority the Giants need to get done sooner than later is they need to resolve Daniel Jones's contract. No surprise, right? I mean, come on. We all kind of knew that. Now, I know there's still people out there who are saying, gosh, move on from Daniel Jones, draft a quarterback, sign somebody. You know, Derek Carr is supposed to be released from the Raiders. Maybe look to get him. No. First off, the Giants, for those of you who want to see the Giants draft a new quarterback, they're drafting too low. And you could say, well, what about if they trade up? No, they've got so many needs, folks. Trading up, I don't think is an option here. And, you know, a lot of you are acting like this is the only year the Giants, even if they wanted to get a new young quarterback, that this is the only year that they can do so. Not the case. There'll be other years to get quarterbacks. You know, sometimes you got to be patient. You got to look down the line and see, okay, who's coming up potentially for the draft that might be a better option if you're in a position to get them. So, I mean, Daniel Jones, believe it or not, is the Giants' best option right now. And they've got to get him under contract, preferably before the start of free agency, because here's why. The Giants, according to Over the Cap, have $44.709 million in cap space. If they have to apply the franchise tag to Daniel Jones, which will cost them $32.416 million, that will leave them, folks, with a whopping $12.293 million in cap space. And this is before they do anything with Kenny Golladay or any other contracts. The Golladay contract, I am expecting them to do something with that contract. Whether they make him pre-June 1st or post-June 1st, which I think makes more sense, that remains to be seen. But the point is the Giants would be left with $12.293 million before they do anything else with other contracts. Now, they need $3.154 million in actual space for their draft class. they don't have to worry about the draft class until June. All right. That's when they'll probably look to get them under contract. So deduct that 3.154 from the 12.2.93, and that drops them to under 10 million in cap space. Again, before they do anything with the Galladay contract. You can't operate like that. I mean, Joe Shane was hamstrung last year due to a lack of cap space. And when you have as many needs as the Giants have, the last thing you want is to have your quarterback sitting there on a 32.416 million franchise tag. You just don't want that, because now you're hamstrung. And the second they assign that tag to him, two things happens. Number one, that money is automatically deducted, regardless if Jones signs the tag or not. And number two, even if, let's say they assign it by the deadline, which is March 7th, and Jones signs 2 days later, for example, guess what? You cannot use that tag again. You are done for the year with that tag. So if you have thoughts of signing, say, Saquon Barkley, you ain't going to be able to do it because you can only use the tag once. So signing Daniel Jones has to be the top priority. And I know at the Super Bowl honors program, Brian Dable told, I believe it was ESPN's Diana Rossini, that they have started having conversations with Daniel's reps. Quite honestly, I'm surprised they haven't started that earlier. Maybe they have, I don't know, but it hasn't been reported. But that would have been my first priority, as opposed to maybe working with Saquon and his reps. I understand why they did Saquon and his reps, because that contract is going to be a little trickier, it seems. But I would have started with Daniel a lot sooner. Maybe the Giants think that they're going to get it done. Maybe they think it's not going to be as difficult. I don't know, but I would have made that my first priority if I had been the Giants. So, okay. Priority number 2, get a good inside linebacker into this building, this facility that the Giants have. Why do I have linebacker as my second priority? For 2 reasons: coverage and run fits. We saw too many times last year how the middle of the field was wide open because the Giants just didn't have a good coverage linebacker. I mean, I think they went through something like 4 or 5 different linebackers, not because of injury, mind you, but because of performance. And they still had bleeding. And as a result, the run game suffered because the linebackers weren't coming up and filling the run holes. So to me, linebacker is like the number one priority after quarterback. All right. Or the number one priority in terms of getting a new person in here. Whether they do free agency, which to me, I think makes more sense, or the draft, or a combination of the two, they've got to revamp that linebacker group because it just wasn't good enough last year. And the proof was in the pudding, folks. Again, what was it, like 4 different linebackers, and all because of performance more so than injuries. So linebacker has got to be the top free agent target, I think, if the Giants are going to go that route. So that's my second priority of 4. My third one, defensive line depth. Now, maybe they go in the draft here, maybe they go free agency, maybe they do a combination of both. But here's what I know. All right. Dexter Lawrence, who, knock on wood, has not missed a game due to injury, played in 82% of the snaps last year on defense, up from his previous career high of 69%. By the end of the year, the Giants had to manage his practice reps because he had a back issue, and I think he had some other kind of, I forget what the other injury was, but he was nursing an injury. You can't keep running Dexter Lawrence out there for 82% of the snaps. And oh, by the way, he also played 29% of the snaps on special teams. You want to have Dexter Lawrence for the long term, you've got to balance that out. You've got to have a rotation. And the Giants, I don't think, had that rotation. Now, they tried to have it. They signed Nick Williams. He got injured, unfortunately. They had DJ Davidson, who also got injured, and that all, factored in and hurt their depth. But, the veterans that they had otherwise, the Justin Ellis's of the world, you got to do something. You got to beef up that depth. I'm sorry. They cannot play Dexter Lawrence 82% of the snaps. It's just, he had a great year, but you're going to wear the guy out. And if you want to have him around for several years, you've got to rebalance his workload. The same thing for Leonard Williams. Now, because of injuries, Leonard Williams played in 75% of the defensive snaps and 14% of special teams. If Leonard Williams isn't injured, he plays in a lot more, I guarantee you. So if the plan is to potentially extend Leonard Williams, who I think has a $32 million cap hit, you better rebalance his workload as well. So to me, defensive line depth is paramount for this team. It's whether they get it in the draft or free agency, they got to get more defensive line depth. They just did not have enough. That's a tough position. And if you're going to win in the trenches, you've got to have a nice rotation there on the defensive line. All right. The final priority that I have on my list, and this might surprise you, I think the Giants need to get another good tight end. Yes, over a wide receiver. And I'm going to tell you why. The Giants, I think, with wide receiver, they're going to have Isaiah Hodgins. They'll bring him back. Wan'Dale Robinson should be healthy at some point. I don't know if he'll be healthy to start the season. I do think the Giants are going to draft a receiver. And I would not be surprised if they add a low-cost veteran at some point, maybe in the second wave of free agency or the third wave of free agency. I don't think the Giants will trade for a receiver right now because of the other needs. But here's why I say tight end. Daniel Bellinger, in an injury-shortened season, averaged 8.7 yards per touch. All right, not too bad. Towards the end there of the season, you'll notice, though, how the Giants kind of moved away from using the tight end a whole lot as a pass target and went more with the receivers. I found that kind of interesting. But let me give you some stats from the Cowboys and the Eagles and what their tight ends were averaging yards per touch. Dallas Goedert of the Eagles averaged 12.8 yards per touch. Dalton Schultz of the Cowboys, 10.1 yards per touch. Now, again, would Daniel Bellinger's average yards per touch have been more had he not had the eye injury? It's possible. But I just feel like the Giants need another good tight end in there just basically to complement Daniel Bellinger. Bellinger's not a bad player. Don't get me wrong. I'm not unhappy with what he brought to the table. But I think the Giants need more at that position, probably a little bit more than receiver. Despite the fact, and I know what you're saying, but Pat, they need a number one receiver. Every year, every week, the Giants try to feature a different guy in the offense based on matchups. So I tend to think number one receiver, that's kind of a misnomer. Do they need a legitimate X receiver? Absolutely. But one week you might see the X receiver as the focal point of the offense. The next week you might see the tight end. The next week you might see the slot guy, So I just think in terms of depth, I would go more with tight end, because receiver, I think the Giants will be able to fill that position. Tight end, I'm not sure how they would fill it, if they would go draft or maybe pick up somebody via free agency. But let's just say I feel better about them filling receiver than I do tight end. So that's why I have tight end above receiver on my list of 4 priorities that I would pursue if I were making the decisions for the Giants. And I know you're probably thinking, thank God you're not, but hey, this is my opinion. So, all right, coming up next, did the Giants make a mistake in trading Kadarius Toney? We're going to answer that, so don't go anywhere. This episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user's manual. So when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. That's why seeking therapy to help you navigate through life's ups and downs can be your first step towards overcoming the challenges and learning productive coping skills. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere, 100% online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match yourself with a therapist. And if things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. There's no waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. Hey, Giant fans, be sure to check out the Locked On Giants podcast on Instagram. We have our own account at Locked On Giants. And also don't forget to check me out on Instagram at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA. You'll find video clips, you'll find audio, you'll find factoids, all kinds of cool things. And as we get into the spring football season, you'll see video clips from practice and much, much more. Again, follow me on Instagram at Patty Traina and follow the Locked On Giants podcast Instagram account at Locked On Giants. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in this segment, I'm going to answer a question submitted by a listener, Lawrence D. But I actually got this question also on Twitter. So I got this question a couple of times following the Super Bowl on Sunday. So let me read what Lawrence D wrote, which is similar to what I got on Twitter. Considering the large contribution Tony made to the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl win, do you think the Giants made a mistake releasing him, or was Tony just not willing to work in Dable's system? First off, the Giants didn't release Tony. They traded him. So big difference here, because the Giants did get two players or two draft picks, I should say, including one that I think is going to be number 101. So just outside of the top 100, which is where ideally you want to draft. And I think the other one I want to say is 212. So let me just double check. I think it's 212 is the other one. But anyway, it's about 212. So anyway, no, I do not think the Giants made a mistake. All right. For what it's worth, Kadarius Toney had a 65-yard punt return in the Super Bowl, which set up, I believe, the go-ahead drive for the Chiefs. Great. Okay. I'm happy for him. I really am. But I wouldn't, it was a big play, but it's not like, he had 10 receptions and 5 touchdowns or anything like that. Yeah, it was a timely play. It was needed. But, let's look at some numbers for Tony. He finished the year catching 14 of 17 pass targets for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns, had 5 rushing attempts for 59 yards and 1 touchdown for Kansas City. You mean to tell me that that's not replaceable in the grand scheme of things? I mean, Tony wasn't even featured in that Chiefs offense, not with Travis Kelce in there and guys, other guys that were in front of him. He was more like a supporting cast member. Now, I can see where you're coming from with the question because of the state of the Giants receivers. But here's the other thing. I mean, Tony just couldn't get on the field for the Giants. And when he did, what did he do? What did he do? Not much. All right. Now, you're saying, okay, what about as a punt returner? Well, for the Chiefs, Tony averaged 6.1 yards per punt return prior to the Super Bowl. He had 10 returns for 61 yards and a long of 9. Richie James, even he who had 3 fumbles, Richie James averaged 7.3 yards per return with a long of 23. So again, what are we talking about here? So, the thing with Tony was this, you go back to last year, and I know I defended him on this because I can't sit here and tell you that I know why he missed the beginning part of the off-season program. That was never announced. So you got to give the guy the benefit of the doubt. But that being said, here's the thing. When you have a new coach coming in, a new coaching staff, and a new GM, and they're offering you a clean slate, it probably would be a good idea if you got yourself into the facility to start buying into the program rather than sitting, on the side. This is assuming he just, he made the choice to sit out. Now, I know Tony came off of knee surgery. He had a procedure last offseason. But even so, you're not doing any football activity those first couple of weeks. You're doing weightlifting and conditioning. And what's the harm in coming in and starting to learn about, how the coach wants to run things or what kind of program to expect, or starting to watch film and do, work with your teammates and your quarterback? What's the harm in that? There really is none. So again, unless Tony did so, missed those first couple of weeks because he had a legitimate issue, somebody was sick or a new baby or something like that, that was not, a check mark in his favor. Now, in terms of just the overall trade, like I said, the Giants they got 2 picks for a guy that basically had minimal production. And you don't give up on talent. I mean, every GM will probably tell you that. So it makes you wonder if there was some underlying reason, whether it be how he was practicing, was he being a professional? A big mantra of the Giants last year was be a pro. Do we know for a fact that Tony was a pro? I mean, I know what the coaches said every time we asked about him. They said, oh, he's doing everything we ask him to. Well, what do you want them to say? You want them to say that, oh, he's not practicing well, or he's not doing this well, or whatever. So something had to be underlying there. And I don't believe it was just the injury factor. There had to be some kind of underlying factor that just basically prompted Joe Shane and Brian Dable to say, you know what, we had enough, we're moving on. And the fact that they got 2 draft picks, I think that's going to help the Giants more in the long run. So no, I do not think the Giants made a mistake in getting rid of Kadarius Toney. I'm glad he's doing well and seems to be happy in Kansas City. Sometimes, certain markets aren't for everybody. The New York market's very difficult to play in. And I go back to last year, or I should say 2021, his rookie season. He had problems there with maturity and issues and whatnot. So did they carry over into 2022? It wouldn't surprise me. So yeah, onward and upward, folks. That's how I feel about Kadarius Toney. I wish him well. I'm glad he found happiness and peace in Kansas City. I'm glad he got his Super Bowl ring, but I do not think the Giants made a mistake in moving on from him, because it just, better to get rid of a guy too soon than to hold on and prolong it. And that's something that the Giants used to do a lot several years ago. And it just dragged the entire franchise down. And if you're trying to build up, you can't be having that. All right. Coming up next, Peter Bukowski caught up with Adoree Jackson at the Super Bowl. Peter Bukowski is the host of Locked On NFL, as well as Locked On Packers. But he caught up with Adoree Jackson on Radio Row at the Super Bowl. So I am going to play that interview for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. These delicious protein bars taste like a candy bar, but don't have all the guilt. Most Built Bars have about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait anymore to get a box shipped from Built.com. Pop into your local Walmart or Sam's Club and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can thank me later. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina. And in this segment, I'm going to play for you the interview that was done by Locked On NFL host Peter Bukowski, who was fortunate enough to be at the Super Bowl last week. He was on Radio Row and he caught up with Giants cornerback Adoree Jackson. They did a nice, I want to say 7-minute interview, some interesting stuff there. So I'm going to play that interview for you now.
We're here, Super Bowl week, Radio Row, Super Bowl 57. It is the Eagles and the Chiefs on Sunday. I'm here with Adoree Jackson, cornerback from the New York Giants. And Adoree, I'm sure you'd rather be playing on Sunday than here. But you did get a chance to see the Eagles a couple times this season and in the playoffs. What do you think New York needs to do to take that next step, to be in that tier of teams that, okay, we're a Super Bowl team now?
Just understand that feeling that we had losing those games and not being satisfied with the result of just making it to the playoffs. I think seeing this, experiencing this, and getting ready to work. I think what we need to do is, get our minds fresh, get our bodies fresh, and when it's time to get back to work, just attack the day because everything starts off 0-0 and everybody's on a clean slate and just be ready to work.
Coach Daboll brought a new energy to this team. All the players have talked about it. There's a different vibe in the city about it. When did you notice, okay, this is a different thing?
It might be cliche, but when we came in for OTAs, obviously when he signed with the team, I met him, talked to him, it was cool. He FaceTimed me. He's a real good, genuine dude. So it's like, just how he really is. And then actually meeting him, and that's just him as a person. I think him being himself, not changing, letting us be ourselves, and to be able to come together and play as one, man, I think that was a breath of fresh air that we needed.
When you were at USC, you got a little run on offense. You had some injuries at receiver in New York this year. Did you ever pull coach aside and say, hey, maybe a jet sweep, maybe a receiver screen? Like, come on, I can do it.
Nah, we joke about it all the time. And he got year one under his belt. We're going to joke again about it, try to get something under there. I did it.
Less of a joke this year, maybe?
Nah, it's a joke, but it's serious. Some jokes, that sound like it's personal. But, yeah, we're going to joke about it, try to figure something out. But, we got a lot of great weapons over there. They got a great scheme, man. And at the end of the day, I don't really want to take nothing from anybody else on that other side of the ball, man, because they all deserve to get that playing time and get that play, because you never know. The play I might could have been somebody else playing. They could have, done something great. So, man, I'm all for playing it, but I do want to see those guys over there thrive.
Wink Martindale is one of those guys that it seems like every defensive player wants to play for a coach like that because he trusts you to just play and play fast and play downhill and be attacking the way that you dictate terms to the offense, not the other way around. As a player, how does that change your mindset versus like, okay, we're gonna play cover 3 all game or whatever it is?
We knew that's what it was. At the end of the day, sometimes if you don't play nothing but zone, you play man, you be like, okay, I got to lock in. For us, it's damn near man every time we're out there. So it's like, we already locked in. And it starts in OTAs. It starts, in camp and getting those reps and getting ready, getting mentally strong and getting prepared for what the season may hold and may be. And, we appreciate, playing in the defense like that.
You've had some time now in the NFL, but how do you animate yourself in the offseason to go, okay, I need a break, but then say, okay, it's time to get back to work? Like, what do you get excited about getting back to work and doing?
Listening to my body. That's one of the things that I try to do the most. And, my mom always tells me sometimes I overpush myself. And sometimes she say, you just need to listen to your body and take a break. And, that's what I'm doing. And then it's going to be a moment. I don't know when it's going to be or how it's going to be. It's always one of those moments where it clicks like, all right, now it's time to get back to work. So just waiting on that moment. But right now, just being present, enjoying what I have, and enjoying life.
Are you still able to add things to your game, polish things? Like, I mean, you're always working on your craft, but are you able to take an off season and go, okay, I really want to work on this thing or these couple things?
No, for sure. I feel like every offseason or even before you go into the season, you should talk to your coaches and ask them what can you improve on, what do you do well. Obviously you want to keep that sharp, but what can you improve on and what can you do better? And when they give you that knowledge, you only go one or two ways. You either ignore it or you attack it and try to get better at it. And I feel like, it's always something I can improve on. And when that time comes in the offseason, I'm really working on that and just trying to be a better player than I was last year.
I asked Cam Smith this, South Carolina corner is probably going to be a first-round pick in the draft this year, but when you line up across a receiver, what is the one trait where when you see it on film, you go, okay, it's going to be a long week of preparation, and then the game is going to be like that?
I feel like that's every. I feel like when the game
is it route running, like what is the one thing where you're like, okay, this guy is going to be a problem this week?
When the game ends, you got to get ready for the next opponent. I treat them all the same. Really, like, don't really want to take nobody lightly because everybody in this league at any moment can go crazy. I mean, take for instance Isaiah Hodgins for us.
Right.
When he was at Buffalo, didn't get whatever it may be. He comes here, go crazy, and then now it's like, oh, you might not know who he was, but now you do. And I try to treat every opponent like that. Like, I don't know what they may be capable of, but I don't want whatever they're capable of to happen on me. So I try to treat them all the same and go out there and just try to display myself and compete.
Are you a goal setter? Are you someone who goes, I want to play every game. I want to get X number of interceptions. Like, do you set those kinds of goals for yourself?
I do. I set those goals, but at the same time, I set them and then just try to figure out how to work to get them. The last goal, my favorite goal that I set, I remember when I was at SC. I just get off of running at the Olympic trials. I go to my coaches and say, I'm going to win the Thorpe. And I just left it at that. They looked at me, thought I was playing. I said, no, I'm going to win the Thorpe this year. And just left it at that. And then every day I just worked. How can I win the Thorpe? Like, I didn't tell them, oh, I'm going to get this many picks. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Just played my game, trusted and believed in myself. And then that year the Lord just, had his hand over me and had 6 interceptions, did some other things on offense and ended up winning the Thorpe, man. It's just a crazy thing when you put your mind to it and understand that the tongue is very powerful and that it can direct you in ways that you can't imagine.
Last thing, we had a crazy week in the NBA. Trade deadline was wild, and there was actually some moves at the NFL trade deadline the last couple of years too that have been really important. Would you like to see the NFL have some of these crazy weeks and players be able to go all over the place, or do you like the way it is?
I think we kind of did. This last offseason, you see Devontae Adams go to Vegas. You've seen Tyreek Hill go to Miami. So you get a sense of that, different people going here and there. James Bradbury goes to the Eagles. So I feel like we have it, and it's just not as crazy as basketball.
It sounds to me after the Thorpe story that you need to tell the Giants we're going to win the Super Bowl this year, and then you just manifest it, and then there it is.
That's all you got to do, manifest it, leave it up to God, and then put in the work, and you won't be surprised, but you'll be amazed of the things that you thought you would do, he'll exceed those.
All right, Giant fans, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Adoree Jackson as done by Peter Bukowski. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode. Keep it here all week long as we continue to bring you all you need to know during the off season here on the Locked On Giants podcast.